Hello guys, it's Ryan here with Hobbies Man. Once again, and today we'll be doing another novel review. Today we're going to be looking at Tarzan, number 3, The Beast of Tarzan, by Edgar Burroughs. This is the Valentine Black cover edition with art by Neil Adams. This one says it's supposed to be the only unauthorized version, complete and abridged. I'm pretty sure most editions are unabridged, and they don't really change the language all that much, but you know, your mileage may vary depending on which one you get. Honestly, in terms of like making sure that you get the right version, the best way to do it would be to buy it from the ERB website. However, I personally don't think that those editions are good because they're print on demand, so they're not actually high quality editions. And even though they have a lot of cool things in them, I'm pretty sure they're very cheap feeling, and I don't really like that. They're also unnecessarily expensive. They're like $30 for a very thin hardcover book. And the hardcover is not that good because, like I said, it's print on demand. I really wish that they would, partner with a real publisher. Maybe Titan Books would do it and actually get really good, well-made editions for ERB fans. But it doesn't seem like they want to, kind of give anyone else money for it. So it is what it is. But if you want like a proper, like, I am sure that this is the right thing, you should get that. Otherwise, you're going to have to track down your own editions, the Valentine ones, or the ones with white covers by Ace, I think. And, there's other ones. There's the tandem versions by that are from the UK. Those don't really have good covers, though, so I don't really recommend those. But, whatever edition you can find, I definitely recommend you do pick it up because it's really, really good. So, yeah, the demographic for this is adult, I guess. I'm not really sure. It's a pulp novel. And I don't think that they were specifically made for adults, but some of the themes and some of the things here are more or less for adults in the sense that some kids might not understand why things happen the way they do in this book, or the language or the way that they refer to certain groups of people, because this is over 100 years old, so it has like issues in that sense. So teenagers and above, I guess, teen plus. Would probably be the right demographic if they publish it today, but I'm not really sure. Honestly, the characters are all adults. There are adult situations, and there's references to adult things. So, your mileage may vary. I would honestly say this is probably a YA and above type of fantasy book. And the genre here is adventure, because technically it's not fantasy stories, and it's not really science fiction stories, although it does lean a little bit into the science fiction realm when you talk about the fact that the gorillas or the apes that Tarzan makes relationships with are not actually like normal gorillas. They're like this more, they're kind of different from normal gorillas. They're this kind of other thing. They're maybe a little bit more humanoid than your standard gorilla. So there is a certain element of like, this could be sci-fi under very specific constraints. So, your mileage may vary with that again. Adaptations-wise, this does not have a real adaptation, as in, I don't think there's any story that's like, okay, we're going to take The Beast of Tarzan and make that into the story. What usually happens, I think, with Tarzan is that, like, people have vague recollections of things that Tarzan has done, and they kind of just join them into one thing. And, so there's probably elements of the story that have been part of the Disney Tarzan show, or the Disney Tarzan movie, or any other adaptation of Tarzan before, and it really just depends. Because, the main draw in this part of the story is Tarzan tames a cheetah, or actually technically a jaguar, or a panther. A cheetah is what he calls them. And he also tames a bunch of gorillas. And so they answer his call, right? So, I'm sure that has happened before in other Tarzan media. Ratings-wise, it's a 4 out of 5. I don't think it's as good as the other two because, honestly, the two Tarzan novels previous to this are like the Tarzan story. Like, together, they make one big, story that completes the arc of Tarzan and finally ends with him having happiness. And this story kind of is like, okay, time skip. Tarzan has a kid now. Let's move on. And so it doesn't really feel like it was necessary, I guess, but also it feels quite different from the other two from the other two books. And even though it's really interesting and enjoyable, I feel like it's less enjoyable than the other two. And I'm not really sure how to quantify it or why. It's just kind of a little bit different, right? So yeah, the premise here is that Tarzan and Jane have a child. They are happy, and it turns out that their happiness might be short-lived because Rokoff and Pavlovich, two Muscovite Russians that were antagonistic to Tarzan in the previous novel, have escaped / been freed from prison, and now they have hatched a nefarious scheme to try to get back at Tarzan. And so this nefarious scheme involves stealing Tarzan's son Jack and ransoming him, for money and for Tarzan's life. And so that's what happens. And then this eventually leads Tarzan and then Jane, because she couldn't stop herself from following Tarzan, to a dangerous endeavor trying to find their child and traversing this lake region in Africa. And it's really interesting and it's cool. And it's a little bit different from what you would think, but it's really, really enjoyable. So yeah, overall, the plot line here is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. And there's something about it that feels very cinematic that I hadn't really noticed, or I don't think I noticed in the first two novels. Because in this novel, basically things happen where a chapter ends, but it doesn't tell you what's happening. It kind of gives you a scene, and then you go back to the next chapter and you see happenings in another region of the country leading up to that same thing, and then the reveal happens in a different chapter, and it feels like a whodunit type novel or a whodunit type movie where they're having concurrent situations happening, and then they converge on a certain point. And I really like that. I thought it was really, really cool. Although sometimes I felt annoyed by it because it didn't feel like the way that he usually writes. And I'm not really sure that that's the case. I'm pretty sure he does write like this all the time. But it felt a little bit annoying because it's I really want to know what happened. So why are you taking so long to tell me? Because I know that you're not a writer that, usually hides things that much. And I think it was mostly for the style and for the way that the story was being told, where Tarzan and Jane are going through the same thing, but they're going at it from different perspectives, and they're dealing with different things, but they're far apart from each other, so they can't directly communicate the issue to each other. And so, you kind of have to have this balance of let's focus on Jane, have a cliffhanger, and then let's focus on Tarzan, have a cliffhanger, and then have them converge and have the situation resolve itself together. But it makes it feel very cinematic, which is really, really cool and really interesting, right? So yeah, let's look at the actual plot line and what happens here. So first of all, we open with Tarzan and Paul Darno chilling and having, a conversation. Kind of, they were happy initially, and then they get a situation explained to them via telegraph that basically says, hey, Rokoff has escaped prison, and he's setting up, a revenge scheme, or at least this is what Tarzan realizes. And it takes, almost seconds after he says it for another telegram to show up and be like, hey, your son has been stolen. Or Jane calls Tarzan, I think, to tell him that, hey, our son has been stolen, come home and we can try to figure out what's going on, right? So he gets back to London, I think. Then he gets in contact with someone, Pavlovich, I think it was, who's like, hey, I know who took your son. I know where he is. Come with me. And don't persecute me, but I'll take you to the place and I'll help you, get this kid back. Turns out it was Pavlovich, and so Tarzan actually gets betrayed immediately, put in a cage on this boat called the Kincaid. And Jane can't help herself, and so she follows Tarzan. And so she gets, embroiled into this situation. She gets put on the Kincaid too. And now Rokoff and Pavlovich have two people to play with, two ways of getting money, and two different situations happening concurrently that are kind of more or less parallels to each other across the rest of the book. And so what happens is that they extort Tarzan, and then they put him on this island called Jungle Island, where no one goes, and then there's these beasts. Of course, this is stupid. Rokoff should know that Tarzan can survive in the jungle, but I think what he said was, I know that you're not going to die here, but I want you to suffer mentally, in the sense that he'll know that his son is being turned into a cannibal. He'll know that Jane is no longer happy, but he won't be able to do anything about it because he won't be able to find the mainland. Now, I'm pretty sure Tarzan could eventually build a boat, and he doesn't really need to for the purpose of the story, but I feel like Rokoff didn't think that through. But he leaves him there and they move on. And then he starts telling Jane different things. And so eventually he kind of Rokoff kind of wants to marry Jane still, so he takes her with him, and then things happen, and eventually he's like, you know what, I'm gonna sell you to this cannibal tribe, and they're gonna do what they want with you, but first I'm gonna do what I want with you. And so that's kind of what happens there. But eventually Jane manages to get a friend on the Kincaid, this Swedish chef called Anderson. And so Anderson and her escape. They take a baby with them, who Anderson thinks is Jack, but they eventually realize he's not. And then eventually they realize what happened, and it was that Paulvich was trying to betray Rokoff. And then, she's going through this, she's escaping, she's getting help by Anderson, and she's trying to stay ahead of Rokoff, and Rokoff is trying to follow her. And then Tarzan tames his beast. He becomes friends with the cheetah, who he never names, which kind of sucks. Technically, its name is cheetah, but that's like calling your cat. So he should have named it at some point. But the thing is that Tarzan can't speak cat the same way he can speak gorilla, so that's why there's an issue. But he tames this beast, and he becomes friends with Akut, which is the leader of this ape tribe, this gorilla tribe. And Akut is smarter than every ape that Tarzan has ever interacted with, even smarter than Kerchak and Kala. And so Akut is like, yo, this guy, he's different than us, but he's also still, kind of like us. And if I follow him, I will learn things, right? So Akut follows Tarzan, and he gathers a group of other apes, and he makes them follow Tarzan. And so Tarzan now has a troop of animals that follow him. And eventually, some natives, some African people, end up, accidentally getting onto the island because they were taken ashore how do I word this? They were hunting on the beach of the shore of Africa. Something happens, and they end up getting dragged out into the ocean and eventually end up on the island. And Tarzan kills all of them except for one guy called Mugambi, who is more or less Tarzan's companion from here on out. And so Mugambi gets taught how to control the animals to an extent by Tarzan, and he becomes part of Tarzan's troop. And so, using the canoes that his native people had with them, they managed to get back to mainland Africa. And so the chase is on, and Tarzan is chasing Rokoff, who's chasing Jane, and they go through this, adventure across this river called the Ugambi, which I'm pretty sure is not a real place, but it doesn't really matter. And so eventually they get to a place, they have a confrontation, things happen. Eventually Rokoff is killed by the cheetah, and things work out eventually after a lot of peril and a lot of back and forth and a lot of ridiculous, but also kind of like, hey, that's a little too easy kind of situations that are pretty enjoyable overall. Like, I really like that about ERP. It's that it doesn't really matter that the situations are a little bit too easy or a little bit too convoluted. They still end up being enjoyable, and I think that that's really, really good. I don't really care that things are not really as legit as possible. All that I care about is that they were fun, and I really like that about Edgar Rice Burroughs and the way he writes. Eventually, Jane and Tarzan reunite. They realize that the child that died on during their adventure was not their son, and that their son is actually safe at home. Again, thanks to greed from different people that were associated with Rokoff. And so they end up back at Jungle Island. There's this final scene where there's a little bit of peril before they manage to make it all the way back to London and have a happy ending, a family reunion. And that's the end of this novel. And I'm very curious to see what happens in The Son of Tarzan, book number 4, because he eventually becomes Korak the Killer. So I'm curious how that happens. And I'm pretty sure Akut ends up showing up again later on, at least from what I've heard from other YouTubers. So I'm very excited to see where that goes. I'll probably end up reading, the next book in the near future here. And I already bought book number 5 over there. So I'm very happy to chug along with this Tarzan stuff. So yeah, let's talk about characters now. We have Tarzan, Jane, Rokoff, Paulvich. Mugambi is a new character that's introduced and that stays relevant because he doesn't die. We have Anderson, and we have these other characters called Gust. Momula the Maori, which is interesting that there's Maori people, and then Kai Sheng, who is a Chinese adventurer, pirate guy, and they all die basically. but they're pretty interesting. And of course we have Cheetah, who they call a panther, but when I think panther, I think a black cat, and that is what that word means. But every time the animal is described, it's actually just describing a normal leopard or jaguar. And I think jaguars are only from the Americas, and so in Africa it'd be a leopard. And you know, they mentioned that it has tawny hide. So tawny is a type of like you know, like yellowish color. So it is a jaguar, like it shows here, or you know, a leopard. And you know, even though it's called a panther throughout the novel, it is a leopard. So you know, keep that you know, in mind. It doesn't really matter, but you know, it kind of confuses me a bit. And the coot, who is these gorillas that you see back there, but they don't really look like gorillas. They look more like chimpanzees. But the way that they're meant, like explained, they are gorillas. They're just like, I guess there's something between a chimpanzee and a gorilla, but they're huge. So you know, you decide what they are. But they have like a language, and they're smarter than your average ape, I guess. In terms of world building, we don't really get anything new. We get introduced to some new tribes and some new regions in Africa. The Ugambi River. We get the taming of a coot, so we learn that, you know, Tarzan has this ability, even though he has previously shown mastery over animals in the sense that he's stronger than them, but he has never actually used that strength in order to gather their loyalty the same way he has here. So technically, I guess we have a new skill for Tarzan. And we get introduced to Mugambi, so we have someone that is African that is going to be part of, you know, Tarzan's group of friends. So that's exciting, that's interesting. But there really isn't anything new. Like, we don't get introduced to, you know, a new ancient city or anything like that. It's not really, you know, deeper like that. It's very surface level stuff. And in terms of art and fan service, or, you know, sexual content, there was implied threats of sexual content, or of sexual assault and stuff like that. And, you know, Rokoff says this to Jane quite a few times. And there really isn't anything, you know, happening. Like, Tarzan doesn't do anything with Jane or anything like that. But there are threats of things like that happening sometimes. And art-wise, the only thing we have is a cover. I really would have liked the map, because honestly, the way that, you know, the novel works, I'm not really sure where they are. Eventually, I looked it up, and it looks like they are in the northern region of Africa, like before it starts to get into sub-Saharan Africa, or actually maybe after sub-Saharan Africa. They're kind of in that region. They call some of the characters Ethiops, which made me think they were in Ethiopia, but Tarzan explicitly says, we didn't cross into the Mediterranean, we didn't cross under the Horn of Africa, like, or under the bottom of Africa. We are still in the western side of Africa. So I was very confused for a while, but I would have really liked the map. But the only art here is the Neil Adams cover, which looks really, really amazing. But honestly, I would really like some illustrated Tarzan editions. I think they'd be really, really cool. And yeah, ratings wise, 4 out of 5. Like I said, it's not as good as 1 and 2, but it was still awesome, fun. And if you're someone that's interested in jungle adventures, but you're not really sure where to start, or, you know, if there's any modern writers, don't worry about it. Just get into Edgar Rice Burroughs. Tarzan is the best for a reason, right? So there you go. That's The Beast of Tarzan. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below to me your thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. And thank you guys very much for getting me to 1,000 subscribers. That's really awesome. I'll eventually do some sort of giveaway, you know, later in the month, probably starting next month, actually, in July. So look forward to that. I'll try to figure out a way to do it in a way to make it interesting, right? So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.